Hello. This lesson is going to be about all the Italians with when white is playing d3, most of the time c3, not always by the way, but most of the time, and then trying to play slow positional game, a very popular setup nowadays, very popular concept. And let's start with knight f6 system. So knight f6, as you remember, white has some more active options like d4 and knight g5. So if you're playing knight f6 with black, you must be ready for those aggressive moves. But very often white is just playing d3. And now, yes, so the second part of this thematic will be about positions with black's bishop on c5. So he can play it right here, for instance, but then most often black players start with bishop c5 instead of knight f6, just not to give this knight g5 option. So let's consider the other options for black without bishop c5. Well, the most common one for a very long time, almost the only system which black played if he didn't want to put the bishop on c5, was bishop e7. Now I will show you next the h6 move, trying to develop the bishop to g7 is becoming quite popular also. So it's hard to say, maybe it's even more often played nowadays than bishop e7. But let's start with the bishop e7 line, castles. So here black in general would like to play d5 if possible, because if black puts the pawn on d6, of course bishop on e7 is more solid, so to say, and in Italian you will see that very often black has to secure the c5 bishop by playing a6 or a5 and bishop a7, losing some tempis. But also the bishop on this diagonal, g1, a7 diagonal, is much more active. So bishop e7 is maybe more solid if you want more simple system, but I think that in general, if I wouldn't say it doesn't fully equalize, but compared to Italian, I myself, as a person who had played a lot Italian with white last recent years, I was quite happy when my opponents were playing bishop e7. Even though, again, I want to repeat that it's perfectly playable system. So the idea is that if white is playing in a normal way, like c3, it's a normal move, very logical, then I think the black can just play d5 and he is perfectly fine after d5. d6 is also possible. The idea is that in case of, let's say, rook e1, then black is playing knight a5, who starts to chase this bishop, and after bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, b5, bishop c2, c5, then all of a sudden we get to this actually Ruy Lopez with c3, d3, a system which is not considered to be not very dangerous for black. Usually play continues like this, knight d2, knight c6, knight f1, etc. There is some theory, but according to the at least nowadays theoretical situation, black equalizes here. I think I had a game with Christopher Lutz myself with black in this position, and I think I equalized quite confidently here. So it's actually quite important for black to have the pawns on a6, b5, because he can create some counterplay then quicker on the queen side. Because without those pawns, as I will show you, maybe white can actually pretend to have a certain edge in this position. Anyway, that is the main idea of white after d6 is to play bishop b3. That's what white usually does. Just that after knight a5, in case of knight a5, black is playing bishop c2, and anyways c5 is logical, and now you get basically the same position without a6, b5 pawns, which is still playable for black. Bishop e6, usually the game continues. White starts to maneuver his knight to g3, sometimes trying to play d4, but that is already probably slightly better for white, even though, I mean, not too much. I think, if I remember correctly, there was a quite good game, Ivanchuk-Naidic, where, Ivanchuk was slightly better and pressing the whole game. Finally, Naidic managed to make a draw. But yeah, if you want to see how the game can develop in this line, you can maybe study this game. But in any case, the white's main problem is that after c3, d5 seems to be enough to equalize. e5, knight d5, rook e1, and now bishop g4 is very important. Otherwise, it's not easy to protect this e5 pawn in an adequate way. But after bishop g4, h3, bishop h5, then g4. Otherwise, black will be perfectly fine. But after g4, bishop g6, knight e5, it's very dangerous for white to take this pawn, because black plays c6 and then followed by bishop d6, f5, and well, it's probably already in black's favor, the position. So I think c3 is not the most accurate move further. Then there is a bishop b3 move further. I think I played it myself in the middle of 90s, couple of times in rapid chess against Garry Kasparov, actually, with white. And here, well, again, the idea is that if d6, and then white wants to play c3. And in case of d5, takes, rook e1. I think there is another time in rapid chess I played h3 against Kasparov, but didn't really achieve much. But rook e1 is the most principal move. And now a very important variation, bishop g4, h3. And I think Garry, it was Novgorod, maybe 95, year 95. He played bishop h5 against me. And after g4, bishop g6, I took the pawn. And the idea is that after, let's say, some move like c6, white is playing queen f3 and then knight c3. It's very important that the knight gets to c3, and also the pawn on d3 is not hanging, which is the case when white has a c3 already played. And Garry was suffering the whole game. He managed to draw in some, worse endgame, but actually he was worse. But from other, I just want to mention that since that time, I think this line considers to be not good for black. But in fact, I think that knight b4 is a very interesting move, and which you can analyze, and maybe it is good enough for black to get a decent game. After knight c3, king h8, again the same story, bishop d6, f5, sometimes knight c6 coming. Maybe it's actually playable, in fact. But also there is another option, is to play bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, knight d4. Of course, otherwise white would just have two bishops in a very comfortable position. And now the principal move is queen takes d5. Otherwise, if queen retreats, then black can just take on d3, play f6, and probably equalize quite easily. So queen takes d5, and this position is, take on c2, and the main line here goes like bishop d2, knight a1 at some point, rook c1, and then c6, bishop f3, and what happened is that black is playing rook d8, he takes on d3, white playing knight c3, then takes back the knight on a1, and this position is probably close to equal, maybe still a little bit more comfortable for white. So still it's white who is playing for a win, but not sure if he can really achieve much. So then after, I think, end of 90s, then white came up with actually totally different concept, which is still, I believe, considered to be the best. And I myself was planning to play like this, actually, if my opponents would play bishop e7 variation, so which is rook e1, d6. Now already black has to play d6. Of course, he cannot play d5, the pawn will be hanging. That's why d6. And again, if c3, knight a5, as we know already, and now a4. Another option is to play a3. Sometimes a3 is more useful than a4, but most of the time it's better to gain more space playing a4. And of course, the idea is that after knight a5, then white just wants to retreat to a2. And here, again, it's maybe playable, but I quite like white's position. I think white is slightly better, and for those of you who wants to have Italian with d3 as his white repertoire, probably I would advise to play exactly like that, with a4 with the a3. So first rook e1. And now, black has different plans. One of the plans is king h8, followed by knight g8 and f5. which sometimes can work, but still it's a bit artificial. Yeah. So a5 is a typical move because white also very often wants to play a6. So usually black sooner or later is playing a6. And now let's say h3, knight g8. And yeah, the big difference is that compared to the positions when white has already pawn on c3, that here knight c3 and knight gets to d5. And there were some games, if I remember correctly, for example, maybe I think it was some rapid chess Caruana Grishuk game. I think here black doesn't have enough play for equality because actually f5 is not made, yes, there is, and white is sometimes playing b4, bishop b2, then breaking up in the center d4. So I think it's in white's favor. So after e4, well, quite logical way of playing is to play bishop e6. And now, actually, first of all, taking and playing c3 might lead to positions which are, well, quite similar to Italian defense, with a bishop on c5 and pawn on a6 or a5, which still might be a bit better for white. I'm not sure if black has fully equalized here. But also knight d2 is not a bad idea. So because here you see black can never really get d5 because the pawn on e5 is hanging. And white just plays his useful moves, h3, c3. So sooner or later black is going to take on c4 and then knight takes c4. And again, since black is struggling with d5, this position is slightly more comfortable for white. I mean, that is Italian. You don't get much more than that in this opening, but that is at least something. At least I, as white, I was always ready to play this type of positions. So bishop e7 is fine. Still, of course, it's very solid for black, but I think here white has a bit more chances to get some small advantage than in Italian with a bishop on c5. So, but then now h6 started to be popular with the idea that after castles, okay, now black has to play d6 first because g5 is too aggressive here. d4 is strong. g5 leads to a worse position after d4. So d6, white is usually playing c3. And now, well, normally for many, many years, black would just play g6. So that was the idea of h6, just to get g6, bishop g7, castle. And to get the same type of position, but yeah, bishop is already on g7. Where it stands better than on e7. But here I think white has a quite important resource d4, which forces black to lose tempi playing queen e7. And queen is not always very well placed on e7 in those positions because bishop g7, d5, yeah, black has a problem here. For instance, knight e5, you take on e5, takes, okay, you take on d8, take on f7, and then g6 pawn is hanging, yeah, after knight takes e4, so white is just pawn up. That's why after d4, black has kind of have to play queen e7, and now rook e1, bishop g7, knight bd2, and so on. The game continues. White just plays quite often h3, then knight f1 at some point. Again, it's playable for black, but yeah, there were quite some games here. It's slightly better for white. I mean, white has some pressure, but that's maybe why lately this g5 move became quite popular. And it's true. I believe it's actually probably a bit better than g6, as strange as it looks. It's a very interesting system which I can recommend you. If you're ready to play knight f6 instead of bishop c5 with black against bishop c4, maybe that's the most interesting system to study. Actually, the idea is that it's not like black wants to play g4, h5 and to mate. Not really this. More the idea is that it's like a prolonged fianchetto, so to say. So black is having a potential of g4, and I will show you. So it's a bit more difficult for white to develop here because this g4 is always on the agenda, especially when the d2 and e1 squares are, when white is playing knight bd2, rook e1, then after g4 he has problems with the knight. And for instance, if white goes d4, first of all, now already g4 probably works, and even bishop g7 maybe is okay because in that variation the pawn on g6 is not hanging, and black is probably just fine here. So maybe g5 is mainly against white playing d4. So now bishop b3 usually is played. Yeah, a4, as we will see in Italian defense, yeah, it's always an option to play a4. But I thought, at least when working, studying this system, I thought bishop b3 maybe in this particular case maybe is a bit more accurate, because white very often is playing knight d2, knight c4, is using the c4 square for the knight. Bishop g7. Well, the minus of g5 compared to g6, of course, that potentially there is this f5 square where the knight maybe on move 30 might land one day, white's knight, and this will be very painful. But it's still far from being realized. But still, that makes this variation not bulletproof. I mean, it's perfectly playable. It's not easy for white to get an advantage, but there is a strategical danger, with this f5 square. So let's say white is playing knight d2, castles. Again, the idea of black is not to try to mate or anything, like g4 or something. Yeah, that's not really leading anywhere. Knight e1, and then sometimes white has the resource f4, f3, actually opening up the f line for the attack. So actually, usually what black is doing is castling, and that is the point now of g5 also, that normally white would just continue rook e1, knight f1, but here there is g4 move, and then knight h4, knight takes e4 is possible. So white has to lose a tempo, has to find a way how to regroup his pieces. And h3 actually is also a very serious option, because this g4 is not a threat really. It's a little bit uncomfortable to play h3 when black plays g5. But since he already castled, so it's not going to mate on the g line most probably. Actually, h3 is also a serious variation. I personally prefer more solid knight c4 move. And now again, it's perfectly playable for black. Bishop e6. First, now it's getting more positional. Rook e1. So again, as you see, white is trying just to stop d5, always to have the pressure on the e5 pawn. And for instance, the game can continue like this. a5, a useful move. White is probably playing a4. And then rook e8. For instance, there was some human and computer games. h3, queen d7, bishop d2. And then, the thing is that, of course, white wants at some point to play knight e3, but then black always has d5. Yeah. And then a slow game. Sometimes white is playing bishop c2. It's not easy for black to find any clear counterplay, but also he has a solid position. So all in all, I think it's perfectly playable for black. I still prefer to be white in this position, but white has just maybe a bit more comfortable game, but I wouldn't say that white is necessarily better in this position. So this system, I think that this is the most promising system against knight f6, d3, h6, unless one day it will be refuted, who knows, because all in all, of course, as a classical chess player, I have my doubts about this concept of playing like this and then c3, g5. But there were many games already, many strong players playing it with black, and nobody yet came close, even close to refuting this system. So an interesting system. Otherwise, bishop e7 again is probably a bit more comfortable, much more solid, very okay, but a bit better probably for white. And so that is about the knight f6, d3 move, and bishop. Let's move to bishop c5, which is here there is much more theory, and the theory is developing rapidly. Last years all best players are playing this position with one of the colors or with both colors, so it will be quite a journey. So fasten your seat belts and try to I will try in the next coming hour or two. I will try to explain you all the nuances, of move orders and positional nuances of this very fashionable system. So now let's move to bishop c4, bishop c5. I would probably share because there are a lot of theory, different systems, I would share it into certain blocks that would be easier probably for you to digest this material, to understand the structure of it, of the theory in this line. So one block would be when black is trying to play d5. Let's start with this block. So instead of d6, just trying to go knight f6 followed by d5. So c3. Well, there is a possibility to play knight c3, knight f6, d3. It's not too dangerous. I played it myself twice, once against Aranyan in the candidates tournament in 2018, Berlin. Actually was a very entertaining game. Another one, I think, was Vaikanze 2019, I believe. So I think both times I didn't really get anything out of the opening. The white's idea is that after d6, he wants to play knight a4, bishop b6, c3. Not actually hurrying to take this bishop, then later trying to take it and to get bishop b3, bishop c2, and maybe some slight advantage due to the pair of bishops, but also it's not much. So you can check, for instance, there was a game, I remember, Karyakin Grishuk from candidates 2018. Also, Alexander Grishuk managed to equalize slowly and to make a draw. But I think even more accurate is just to go a6 and knight d5. I mean, black simply wants to get d6, h6, normal play. So the idea is somehow to try to get knight d5, threatening bishop g5, but then h6, c3, d6, and somehow black is just in time to equalize here. So this line is not too dangerous in my opinion. Then there are some options to play castle in d3 or d3 castles, but that I will come back to it later. So first let's investigate the direct play. I mean c3, knight f6, d3 castles. Well, very important, not to make this mistake, because here d5 simply doesn't work. White can take and play queen b3, and it's bad for black. So if you want to play the system with d5, you should first castle. Now again, there are some moves like bishop g5. This I will cover in the bishop g5 section. In this part of it, when white is trying to play bishop g5 in many different positions, different move orders. But for now, well, usually castle white is playing. There is an option to play b4, but then bishop e7. That is an important move, and I think it's perfectly fine for black here. If castles d5, ed knight d5, actually b4 is pretty weakening here because the c3 pawn is hanging, and it works very well tactically for black. Maybe he's already even slightly better, like rook e1, bishop f6, and then it's not easy for white to finish his development. So that is not advisable. But knight d2, that is playable. d5, bishop b3. Well, black has a numerous, has different options here. I think, well, has no problems, but at least this is playable for white. You can check the games. I think Magnus Carlsen played in rapid ones like that, but all in all, it's not too dangerous. So castles, and now d5. Okay, that is the idea. Ed knight d5. Well, of course, it's very healthy strategically. I mean, of course, it's in general. Very often in these structures, and in Ruy Lopez actually playing, I mean, d5 is black's main idea, sooner or later to try to get d5. Here black gets immediately d5, and then of course if he just managed to develop, he will be very, very fine. I mean, more than fine, because of the good pawn structure. Just that there are a lot of tactical, especially with the bishop on c5, there are a lot of tactical ideas for white. I mean, trying to attack this e5 pawn. So if you want to play this system with black, you really need to study it move per move. I mean, here quite a lot of theory. I think that in general, black is doing fine here. I don't think there is any way for white to get an advantage, but there are many tries, and the precision and the knowledge of theory is much more important than in d6 lines, where after d6 most of the time black can play slowly and get a kind of positional game. Here it's very direct play. So I will just give you the structure of the theory here. Well, white two main attempts is to play rook e1 and a4. Knight bd2 is not good. I mean, after knight b6, black immediately has a good game because bishop b5, simply f6, and then sooner actually than later, white will have to exchange this very important white square bishop, and so black is perfectly okay. I would even say that probably white should really try to be careful and to equalize quickly here, not to get slightly worse. So lately rook e1 became the main line, the most fashionable move. Before a4 actually was the main move, and still it's a serious attempt. Because, well, white is preparing a5 before some pawn march on the queen side, and also securing his bishop in case of knight b6. Sometimes, securing that the bishop will not be exchanged. So there are lots of moves. Black has many moves here. a5 was considered to be the main line for a long time, but maybe knight b6, I can draw your attention on this move. It actually might be fine. Well, it just actually trying to play for a draw, but with very good chances to achieve the desired result. Because now, well, the theory goes, I think bishop b3 is not very dangerous here. So the main moves are bishop b5. There is also bishop g5 idea. And for instance, black has queen d6. You see, very, very direct play. So you need to know move per move here, because let's say after b4, looks like black just blundered a piece. But in fact, knight takes c4, b c5, and queen g6. D takes e4, e4. And that works perfectly well. I think it's basically a draw here. So black takes the piece back and white is a pawn up, sometimes even two pawns up, because taking the pawn on c7, but with all those c pawns and the bad development, knight on b1, no really chance to win the game. And if bishop b5, then knight e7, a very strange way of playing, but just trying to chase the white square bishop, and after a5, c6. So this is a very important position. A, b, c, b, rook a7, pretty forced, takes, bishop a7, knight e5, bishop f5. And okay, typical Marshall kind of type of position. White is pawn up, of course white is totally safe, but if white manages to develop, he will be a pawn up and actually much better. But it seems that just by tempi, black is in time in all lines to make a draw. There was a game, for example, I remember Anand Soh, where obviously Soh, who is always very well prepared, he managed to equalize it very, very precisely, I guess with the help of computer preparation. So that might actually, knight b6 might actually equalize, but that is really trying just to make a forced draw in a slightly worse position, and with the help of engines in your preparation, just try to, no chance to get anything more than a draw. But after, usually the a5 is played. Black can also play a6 is also another move, and I think that was Karyakin played against me once in Stavanger. I think it was 2017. Also not easy for white to get anything really special. But a5, and now again a lot of theory here. The main line goes like this: rook e1, bishop g4, knight bd2, knight b6, bishop b5, and now bishop d6, knight e4, knight a7, and so on and so on. So you can check the theory. I think that again, black is just in time in every line, just in time to equalize here. So a4 is interesting, quite a serious move, but black has a number, or actually more than one option to be probably to be okay finally. So rook e1 is more direct, and once computers discovered the idea which I'm going to show you now, it became popular. Before, it was considered to be harmless because of bishop g4, knight bd2 now, h3, bishop h5 can be included, but anyway, knight bd2 is necessary. And now knight b6. That is a problem. White's problem that now, I mean, it was considered that black just takes the bishop and everything is fine. So let's say now h3. Strangely enough, after knight c4, bishop f3, queen f3, it's not so easy for black to equalize, because once he protects the pawn on e5, white starts to push his pawns b4, b5, a4, and it's slightly worse for black. But bishop h5 and b4 was usually played, but then computers, they found a very safe way for equality here. Bishop e7 and many different options. Main one is g4, bishop g6, b5, knight a5, knight takes e5. White takes a pawn, but after bishop f6, black is taking it back in every line, and it seems to be just a draw at the end. And then at some point, white found this bishop b3 idea, which is now maybe the main position after in this d5 line, and there are still discussions. It's still not so clear. I mean, it's pretty dangerous for black. You really need to analyze it not to play it with the hand, so to say. But there are two major options for black. One is to play simply king h8, trying to go f5, knight e4, and now knight d7. Again, recently there are games in this position. I think I had a look at it a bit, and it is extremely complicated. Extremely. I mean, white has a number of options to try to play for advantage, but I had a feeling that if black analyze it well, I mean, black also has some options, and actually the position can get very double-edged. So here, your preparation is very important. I mean, who is better prepared? But objectively, I thought that probably if black really knows very well what he's doing and analyze it a lot, probably he should be able to hold here. But white has quite a number of interesting options, so it's not a bulletproof way for black to equalize king h8. But queen takes d3 is a very logical move, and now knight takes e5. Yeah, that's very, very strange, very strange way of playing. But computers, they approve it. I mean, there is no refutation of this line. So the best move here is queen f5, and now knight ef3, and there are different moves here: rook d8, rook e8. Actually, it looks like black is slightly better already, but in fact not. In fact, black is still struggling to equalize fully. I don't really think it's a big problem for black here, finally to equalize. But there were games, and I remember there were games Carlsen with So and some other very strong players playing. It's not so trivial, let's put it this way. So black has to be careful, and again here the computer preparation is very important. So the last word of this variation hasn't been said yet, but my feeling is that black should be able to equalize also here. So this d5 line is actually very straightforward, very direct, and quite interesting for black in general. The only minus that white has quite a number of options, and that is what white trying quite often to do, is to play not to start with c3, but to play castles, or d3 first and then castles. Let's say castles, knight f6, d3. And now in case of d6, white would just play c3 and move to this other lines with the d6. And in case of castle, here white has a number of options without c3, just to avoid this d5 system. And there are so many of those options that sometimes, I also play this d5 from time to time with black, but I was really getting a bit confused about all possible move orders. For instance, white has he has bishop g5 idea to play this variation. Then h6, bishop h4. If black plays d6, then Yeah, white can at minimum play c3 and move to the position which we are going to investigate later. But also black has bishop e7 move here, and trying to get knight h5, very typical idea in these variations. For instance, c3, yeah, black is usually playing knight h5 immediately or after d6 also, and it seems that this position is, once you change bishops, this position is pretty equal. There is nothing really for white. So, but white has some strange tries like playing bishop g3, d6, and h3. For example, h3 or later on h3, just trying to stop knight h5. Yeah, possible. I mean, there is some theory here. Actually, maybe h3 here, knight a5 will go. So I guess first maybe c3, just because knight h5, white might have knight takes e5, yeah, tactically. Anyways, yeah, that is an option. I don't really think it's too dangerous for black, but it's playable. So that is one option. Another option, yeah, very important, that if white plays rook e1, which looks very logical, yeah, because now definitely black doesn't have d5. And in case of d6, he just wants to play c3 and to move to all those main lines we will investigate later on. But what is very important is that after rook e1, black has knight g4. And after rook e2, well, just white wants to play h3 to kick the knight back and to play c3. It looks like it doesn't make sense, but in fact, king h8 works. In after h3, f5. Okay, this was very important discovery of engines, and I've checked it a lot, very carefully. At least a few years ago, I really couldn't find any advantage for white. Anyways, if you are playing black, you need to study this very sharp variation. But it seems that it works. So there is no easy way for white to avoid this c3 d5 system. Otherwise, rook e1 would be simple. And but white also tries, for instance, h3. That was I tried it once or twice to start with h3. His idea is after d6 again to play c3, but h3 is not, again, yeah, it's not. Maybe it's better to start with rook e1 instead of h3 in this d6 line, because it limits a little bit white's options. But anyways, it's also possible. I mean, that was my idea, it's just after d6 to play c3 and to get to those lines with d6. But it's not clear if after d5 white has anything special, e d5, knight d5. There are more chances here because, white can play rook e1 here or a4. Also, both moves are interesting. I think a4 was played by Carlsen once or twice. Because white also has an option to play knight c3 quite often in these positions. More chance. I mean, it's not so easy for black to equalize, but again, it's always in this situation that if you analyze it with computer, very, very, you're very well prepared. You remember all those move orders, all the nuances. Probably black should be able to equalize here as well. I mean, because usually if you are playing already the system d5, you really want to play d5 against anything. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to play d6 here and to move to the other system, even though, of course, having h3, you actually removed lots of interesting systems for white. For instance, bishop g5. Here, all those systems with bishop g5 already do not work with a pawn on h3. But still. And another idea is which is even more popular, is that white can start to play a4. And here d5 is considered to be takes rook e1. This position is considered to be slightly worse already for black, with a4 instead of h3. So usually after a4, black finally plays d6 or e5 first. Actually, a5 first is also possible. I mean, but then maybe white can get to this bishop g5, and here a4, e5 is quite useful for white. So you see, I'm sorry to get you confused. Probably you're already confused with all those move orders. That is the system. Yeah, that is Italian, so many different move orders that even very experienced players who played, with both colors, like myself, I don't know how many games I've played it, but still, from time to time, I was confused, with all those move orders. So it's actually quite difficult to understand all the nuances here. Also, after a5, white can play c3, for example, and in case of d5, ed5, knight d5, at least white has forced a4, a5. So after but after a4, actually d6 is usually played, and now c3, and then it gets to the d6 variation. But white played a4, which of course, you can play a6, and this this will move you to the main theory. But I think nowadays black often plays a5, and actually very often, as you will see later during this lesson, that actually black is playing a5 very often with white's pawn on a2. So it's like white, I wouldn't say lost a tempi playing a4, but it's not a necessary move. That is an option, that is a type of position we are going to consider later. So as I see, the main problem, I would say, if you can call it a problem of black in this system of when he wants to play d5, is that white has a numerous move orders how to, I wouldn't say to avoid it, but at least to make it more problematic for black, to equalize after d5. I think that's one of the reasons why, for instance, finally I decided, I tried a few times playing systems with d5. Finally, I decided to play d6 because I thought it's simpler. I mean, not to confuse, myself, and also, not to memorize a lot of very direct lines, even after c3 d5 system. But again, it's a very serious system, and if you want to play it, if you're a bit not comfortable with those positions after d6, definitely it is a very serious weapon. I mean, you can analyze it and try to understand all those move orders, all those ideas when white postpones playing c3 and tries to gain something with it. Probably objectively it is quite a good system and should be equalizing. But that is a matter of taste. So now let's move to d6 systems. And again, I want to make it in blocks. So first, let's say d6 here. And first I want to show you all those bishop g5 variations. When white is playing bishop g5, there are many different move orders how to do it. So that will be another block which I'm going to present you now. So what can I say about this bishop g5 concept? It's very double-edged, very risky for white, also for both. I mean, the game is becoming, in general, usually much sharper than in those lines when white is playing castles, rook e1, h3, etc. It needs, if you decide to play it with white, you need to have a very good preparation. I mean, very as powerful machine as possible, and still it doesn't guarantee you that you will not miss some idea, because the position is extremely rich. So there you have to be ready for sharp battle, and it's a matter of taste again. Yes, I was always, I think I haven't played this bishop g5 because somehow very often black is playing h6 g5, white retreats with his bishop to g3, and this bishop is for that moment at least, and for quite some time, very often is really not a great piece. Even sometimes black has this h5 h4 idea. So but from other point of view, it's developed, and white very often tries at some point to go d4, and then the bishop becomes active, and actually if white manages d4 under good circumstances, very often he's getting an advantage with his bishop on g3. So again, now let's consider all the possible move orders. There are many. One is, for instance, to play d3, knight f6, bishop g5 immediately. h6, bishop h4, it just gives black possibility to play bishop e7, which is a very solid way of playing. And in case of d6, white can just play c3 and move to the system, to this move order, which I'm going to show you now, which is d3, d6. And well, there are two options. White can try to castle first. And in case if black castle, sometimes black players, they play h6 here because they just want to avoid those bishop g5 systems. But in those main lines, because usually it follows by castle, black, castling, but in those main lines, for instance, after rook e1 castle, now black already has, well, whether first a4, a6, a5, or immediately knight bd2. White can try to gain half tempo, not playing h3 too early and then followed by knight f1. This we will consider later. So, but h6, if you're so worried about bishop g5, is definitely a playable move. And again, if you're playing those main systems with h6, because there are some lines where black doesn't play h6. But let's say, let's consider that you're not afraid of bishop g5. And objectively, I don't think there is a big reason to be afraid, because it also gives black chances to play for a win here. So why not? In general, I believe that this bishop g5, bishop h4 system is interesting. It's playable for white, but I was always happy to play it with black because of what I've said, that black can really get even better out of the opening. So a6 usually, it's always a very useful in these positions, because once, especially after bishop g5, bishop h4, and then g5, bishop g3, often, as I mentioned already, white is very often threatening d4. So a6 and bishop a7, let's say knight bd2, bishop a7, or a4, bishop a7. Anyways, white needs to do something with this bishop, because often knight a5 becoming a threat, trying to take this bishop. So white is usually playing a4. I think here it's better than playing bishop b3, because one of the important white's ideas in this bishop g5 systems is to push b4, b5, d4. So that's why I believe that a4 has to be played. Or let's say immediately bishop a7, knight bd2. And now, well, the main idea is that, of course, if black it's always about this, that if black manages just to play g5, knight h5, then he will be at least equal. But it just doesn't work tactically, because white has knight takes e5, and after knight takes g3, bishop takes f7 check, king f8, knight g6 check, and let's say if king f7, then white is just better, taking and then playing d4, and in a more or less equal material, with more or less equal material, black king is very weak and white is much better. So then king g7 is played, and now fg is important. I think the idea is that after rook h7, that white can protect this bishop on f7, rook f1. So king takes f7, take on h8, d4, and again, then castle, a very dangerous attack on the f line, so this is not recommended. That's why I myself played it against Viswanathan, and this is the main move here, queen e7. The point is that if black castles here, of course white can castle, and that will transpose to the system which we will consider right after this one. But white has additional options like knight f1 and so on, so white can try to organize an attack, without castle, so it's a bit dangerous. So I would not recommend you to do this unless, if white hasn't castled yet, maybe better you also don't try it. So queen e7 usually is a move. So actually it is preparing g5, knight h5. So for instance, if I think I had a game with Viswanathan in Vaikanze 2018, he played h3, but then already g5, knight h5 works perfectly well, because after knight e5, black can take, knight takes c6, and here, after knight takes c6, there is bishop takes f2 check, king takes f2, knight takes h1 check. And black is just winning here. Yes, and after bishop takes f7 check, what is important that now black already has king d8 move. So and then I think we should play bishop h2, and but black is playing queen f6, knight f4. I got a very good position. Actually, won quite a nice game. So h3 is not really the move. So now white's best try is to castle, but that is really dangerous. I mean, actually, there is a lot of theory here, and before computer era, I think nobody would, in his mind, actually go for those positions because they look awfully dangerous for white. But somehow, computers showing that it's not so clear. I mean, I would still be really worried to play like this with white. But again, if you're black, you have to be very well prepared against this line. So let's say g5, bishop g3. Black can always play bishop g4 in these positions, and actually it's perfectly playable. But the main line for black is a strange move, knight d7. Or knight h7 actually, because it follows with knight f8. I think knight d7 is a bit more accurate. h5 straightforward looks very good, but after h4, computers are happy with white, saying that white is better. Then if black castles, then it's not such a good version because black have played queen e7, which is absolutely not necessary move, and probably white has quite decent chances to get an advantage here. For instance, b4, very typical idea, followed by b5 and d4. So that is not recommended also. At knight d7 here, the game is completely crazy, and you just need to analyze it with engine and check games. And I think it's totally unclear. I would say, probably objectively equal, I would say, whatever it means, because the position is so difficult to play that it doesn't mean much. Here you need to study this very carefully. I think the main line goes like this: before knight f8. So black is just preparing knight g6 and then h5, h4, g4, and basically just trying to mate white. So b5, white has to organize his counter play. Now knight a5 is one move. Another move is knight d8. I think there was a game recently, rapid game against Dominguez with Grishuk, and I think Dominguez, he analyzed it with the engine. I mean, it was very strange play. d4, knight g6, h3, h5. It looks like white is getting mated already, but strangely enough, the quiet move bishop d5, and so on and so on. And finally, actually, Dominguez managed to win this game. But so all in all, very sharp, complicated line. But another also, by the way, recently I saw Giri playing a5 and then trying the plan with bishop d7, queen e7, and even sometimes long castle, and again followed by g5. So very, very complicated position. To my taste, too risky for white, but again, also white can get better if his preparation is superior to his opponents. And a bit safer for white is to play castles, let's say castles, and then bishop g5 here. Bishop g5 here, I mean h6, bishop h4, g5 probably better here, or again after a6, a4, g5, because knight takes g5 doesn't work here. I mean, that is very important, that it looks dangerous, but in fact it doesn't work. You can check it with engines. Black is better here. So bishop g3, and again a6 is usually played, so knight bd2, bishop a7, a4, or a4, bishop a7, knight bd2. So this is a tabia. Here of course white has more control on the position, but also again my feeling that black should be okay here, but you need really to to know exactly what you are doing with both colors. In fact, there are lots of nuances. For instance, I will just show you some major ideas. For knight h5 doesn't work because of knight takes e5. That's the point. Otherwise, immediately black will be at least equal. But here it's just pawn up. Very important that after g4, with the idea knight h4, knight h5, which could be quite good for black also, but white has bishop h4. That is a very important move. And whether you take on f3 first or you play king g7. Then very important is king h1 move. And that makes a big difference compared to some other lines, which I will show you later. Here white is better after gf, queen f3. I think one of the white's ideas is even here to play g4, rook g1, g5. This pin is very annoying, very difficult to get rid of, and so g4 is a mistake here. Then again, black can always play bishop g4, h3, bishop h5. Usually white is trying to organize his plays with b4. Not very popular choice for black. I mean, from black players, it's not very often played on the top level. I think it's maybe a little bit underestimated this. I think it's perfectly playable for black also. But what is now more popular is knight h7 move. A little strange, but black wants again to play king h8, h5, and so on, to sometimes f5. I think I played myself this once against Duda in Vaikanze 2019. I've confused something and got worse out of the opening, but it is a serious move. But I think the main line nowadays is considered to be king g7, and then also actually preparing knight h7, preparing knight h5, just making a useful move. And actually mainly preparing g4, because the idea is that after, let's say, b4, a very normal idea to play, but then already g4 works. Why? Because after knight h4, knight h5, it's quite good for black, because he wants queen g5, f5, and having a very, very good position. But the main point is after bishop h4, now black has knight e7 move. And black is doing fine. He wants knight g6. And after bishop f6, king f6, with the king on h1, somehow white would just retreat his knights and play f4 very quickly. And here black is just in time to counter it with f5 or knight g6. According to theory, black is doing well here, very well, at least equal. So that's why after king g7, I think white's best is rook e1. And now there are different options for black. Again, moves like knight h7 are possible, but the most straightforward is g4 again. Again, with the idea bishop h4, knight e7, and after knight h4, knight h5. Here, white. It's very important that white is in time to play knight f1, queen g5, knight e3, and a very complicated position. I think there was a game Anand Nakamura here. Anand managed to win it, but all in all, probably black should be able to, to equalize here. I think knight e7 is one of the moves, and so on. Yeah, very complicated position. White is trying to play d4. So yeah, this line is perfectly playable for white. The theory is still developing here. A lot of games of strong players in this position. Very rich position. Actually, lots of ideas. I even saw some idea. I think Aranyan played recently. At some point, he was playing knight a5, bishop a2, knight h5. So the idea is to take. Of course, black is losing tempest, but at least now knight takes e5 doesn't seem to work so well, at least after knight takes g3. And the idea is to take this bishop on g3. But maybe white also has some options like playing king h1, knight g3, fg3, maybe opening up the f line. So, okay, a lot of different ideas here. Very rich position, very interesting for both colors. So, that is about bishop g5 variations. Also, another bishop g5 move order is that after castle, sometimes white can play bishop g5 here, because it's also a way to to defend against this d5 system. That gives black an option to play, let's say, h6, bishop h4, and since the pawn is not yet on d6, black quite often goes bishop e7 here. And so with the idea, I think I've played it with white against Matlakov, also Vaikanze 2018, because he played this d5 system. I didn't want to give it. And I played, if I remember correctly, knight bd2 simply, d6, and bishop b3. Another idea is to play a4 instead of bishop b3, knight h5, and bishop g3. That is what I believe was played by Vashila Graf against me in Rapid game. You can check. A little bit strange idea to give up the bishop, but since white hasn't castle yet, he wants to organize some knight f1, knight e3, and some play there. Again, there is a theory. I think one of the main moves is g6, followed by king g7 and f5. Very sharp and direct play. I think according to theory, black is doing fine here. I just played bishop b3 with white and knight h5, which is the most logical way of playing here. And I decided I just took and played knight c4, and actually got better rather quickly because my opponent played the wrong concept. I believe he played knight f4, g3, knight h3, putting the knight on h3, but I don't think it's doing that much there. So white is playing knight e3, queen e2, and I actually made long castle and got better out of the opening. But yeah, actually, if black simply plays some accurate move like knight f6 followed by bishop e6, white has a very nominal plus, but yeah, nothing special. And again, after bishop g5, you can try to, to play. Quite recently with black, I played against Wesley So in Blitz, and again in this position, that's another actually idea. For black, I played like this, and then trying to ask white what is he doing, because if he castles, then I move to this castle system, which I was ready to play with black. And otherwise, I think he played some move like bishop h4, waiting move, and then I tried something like king h8 followed by knight e7. Is a totally new territory. I think I got fine out of the opening. So you see a lot of move orders. Yeah, you need to study it. You need to get some practice to navigate in all those nuances of Italian with bishop g5 or without bishop g5. But I hope I gave you a general basic idea of what is going on there, typical motives of those positions. So then, yeah, if you want to play it, especially on a professional level, of course, you need to make some more work here. But I believe that the general structure is there already, after my explanation. So let's now move to the more quiet kind of classical systems when both sides mostly is castling, and then there is another block of huge theory with another thousands of different move orders, which I will try to explain you, that you can navigate yourself when you are studying it, then at home, and especially when you'll be playing with both colors over the board. And finally, let us move to a solid positional play. So the systems when black is playing d6 and white castles and trying to get a solid, safe position with a small pressure. That is the most popular choice of white. And so, yeah, here again, there will be a lot of different move orders. The system is very fashionable nowadays, so lots of games of top players here. And even if, of course, the theory grew enormously since last 10 years or even less of this variation, still there are some things to discover, and so still all the time new games coming out, some small new adjustments, ideas. So there is no clear, statement, assessment of this variation yet. One thing is clear, that okay, white doesn't have much. If black knows what he is doing and analyze it well, very well prepared, should be able to equalize. But then still, most of the time, even if black equalizes, still the position is, quite rich of ideas, and you can still play and try to win the game with white. So for a black player, I would choose you if you decide to play with d6. I would advise you to choose the system you want to play, because there are different systems. Sometimes you can put pawn on a5, on a6, and so on. well, better maybe even two systems, and then to get some practice, to get some games, to get the feeling for those middle games positions which arise in those variations. So okay, let's go. What are the options? Now, normally black sooner or later castles, but there is one line which is actually not so bad. It makes sense when black plays a6. Let's say white is playing with a4, which is most fashionable nowadays. So this or that way, maybe rook e1 is an interesting move further against this system. With the idea, let's say after bishop a7 to play a4, and then if h6, so black is trying to play with g5, not castling. Now maybe instead of knight bd2, you can try to play b4, because I guess here g5 shouldn't really be working anymore, because at minimum white has bishop e3, probably followed by knight bd2 at some point. So, but then black can castle already, and usually white doesn't hurry playing b4 in these positions, but still it's possible to investigate it. I mean, if you are afraid of of the main line, which happens after knight bd2, I mean after a4, bishop a7, rook e1 and knight bd2, then you can try to avoid it. But I think that objectively, this h6 g5 plan probably is a bit dubious. But again, for black, you can have it in your repertoire. It is not as bad as it looks, I would put it this way. Rook e1. Well, usually h3 is very dangerous to play. I mean, before black castle, because then h6 and with a plan g5 can be really dangerous for white. So even if nowadays modern computers, they are finding some ways for white to be okay there, but I don't recommend you to do this, and there is no need really. It's better to play first rook e1 in my opinion, and then normally black castles. This we will consider later, but there is a move h6, again with the idea that if h3, black just wants to go g5, g4. This is quite dangerous. So usually, of course, white can always play bishop e3 and just be safe here, but in general, usually after the exchange of these bishops, black is extremely solid and white, cannot really have much, if anything, in this position, but at least it's safe if you want. But otherwise, knight bd2 and now g5. A very strange way of playing. I mean, it looks like black is not really ready for such aggressive action, but it's not that bad, I can assure you. I think the best move here is b4. If white is playing knight f1, then black just continues in a very straightforward manner. Let's say g4. If knight d2, h5, simply wants h4, g3, and actually it is unclear, but I would probably prefer to be black here, has quite some initiative. So maybe it's safer for white to play knight h4. It's a pawn sacrifice. Knight takes e4, d4, queen takes h4, and bishop e3. And there were some games here, and white has probably enough compensation for the pawn, but no more than that. After all, it's a central pawn. So that's why after g5, b4 is the main move. And because now already g4 doesn't work so well, white has knight h4, and the big difference is that after knight takes e4, he can take with a knight on e4. Queen h4, d4, and white seems to be better here. So that's why actually some different moves. There is knight h5 move, but I don't think it's working so well. But nowadays knight h7 seems to be the main line. Again, a very strange move, very computerish play, of course. Normally humans wouldn't play like this, but it's not so simple. The situation is not so simple. I think that finally computers, they found, according to at least engines, king h1 seems to be the best move. Because, if you take on f2, then obviously rook f1 comes, and there is very powerful attack on the f line. And in case of g4, that's why king h1 is playing, just to have knight g1. I mean, don't laugh, but this is supposed to be the best way of playing for white, and computer thinks that white has some advantage here. So the idea is that if black continues trying to mate, in fact, white starts to get his own attack, rook f1, and then followed by f4. But anyway, the system is interesting. I mean, it's playable, definitely playable. So yeah, and if you're white, you need to know about this system, because it's not funny to face this g5 over the board, and if your opponent is prepared. But normally black is playing castle. Again, there are many move orders. You can start with h6 first, but as I've mentioned already, if you start with h6, let's say rook e1, castle, or first a6, a4, then white can try to play knight d2, and it might be quite important that, for instance, if black is playing in this way, like this, then white can already, instead of h3, actually get immediately knight f1, and this might get him into a better version, slightly better versions of a usual standard play. So h6 is possible, but I think nowadays it's more connected with some play like a5 here. Whatever this we will consider later. In any ways, there are so many different move orders that it's just impossible to cover it in such a short time. Actually, it's probably there is enough theory and nuances in this opening system actually to have a special course on it. So I'm just trying to give you the most important information about it now. So let's say castles, and now white has, as we know already, bishop g5 is one of the possible plans. b4 is not too dangerous. Bishop b6, a4. It would make sense if for instance black would play a6, a5. That would be quite a nice grip. White would have quite a nice grip on the queen side, and maybe, I guess, white should be slightly better here. But the point is that black has a5 already, and after b5, knight e7, and then that very typical play, knight to g6, and then bishop b3, c6, trying to go d5, knight c4, bishop c7, and black is totally fine in this position. So b4 is not very, it's quite a rare guess nowadays in tournament practice. Then, the question is, let's say white has two setups. One is the old setup, is trying to play at some point bishop b3 against a6, for instance. And the new way of playing it is to play a4. So the same idea, to secure the bishop, because sooner or later black wants to play knight a5, especially when the c5 bishop will retreat from to b6 or a7, and then white needs to save his bishop. So the question is how exactly. Bishop b3 is the old-fashioned way, and this a4 is a new concept, maybe only like 5-6 years old, but very dangerous. And now most of the games are played with this concept, a4. But let me first show you the old concept, bishop b3. So let's say white plays rook e1 here. Doesn't need to hurry with bishop b3. So let's say a6. Yeah, we are talking for the moment about the a6 variations, old-fashioned way. And now bishop b3. Or you can also start with h3. So that was, I would usually start with h3 to have a choice, because knight a5 b4, knight takes c4, bc5 is slightly better for white, I believe. Here knight a5, black plays, and white takes on d6, or even immediately starting with a4. Let's say knight c6 takes on d6 and c4, and white has a better pawn structure and some kind of pleasant plus. So usually black doesn't play here knight a5. So he's playing with a bishop a7, and then you can choose playing a4 or let's say bishop b3. Or another way is to play h6, and again you have a choice of playing a4, bishop b3. If bishop b3, maybe black can try to go rook e8 and to try to play with the fact that bishop is still not on a7. That actually makes some sense. For instance, knight d2, bishop e6, and in case if white is playing bishop c2, so with a bishop on a7 we will consider it later, but here maybe black can get d5 immediately, and actually bishop can get back to f8. So if you want to play the bishop b3 system, you need to find the correct move order. Maybe to start with bishop b3 here, But then also black has some options like h6. At least after h6 you can already play knight bd2, or maybe rook e8, some moves. But most of the time it gets to this position anyway. Bishop a7, and now a very important move order to remember. I mean, to know for white that you should not play knight bd2 here, because then black has knight g4 with a pawn on h7. With a pawn on h7, so that's why in this particular position, if you want to play for opening advantage with white, you're almost forced to start with h3, because knight bd2, knight g4, rook e2, king h8, h3, f5. Actually, it works very well for black, and black has quite a nice position and, well, quite dangerous initiative. That's why h3 is a must, in my opinion, here. And usually black has different options, but most of the time, I mean, the most logical is to play h6, knight bd2, and rook e8. There is a system knight h5, knight f1, queen f6, trying to play knight f4, but I think that it's, according to the modern state of theory, yeah, it's a bit dubious. Well, first of all, white has bishop e3 move, but also knight e3 is actually a very interesting setup for white, and after knight f4, which is very logical. Now white is playing knight g4, and after queen g6, for instance, now white has a very interesting, actually, and probably it's the best for white, is a pawn sacrifice, just trying to take and playing d4, simply like this. And actually, yeah, after black takes this pawn, takes, and white plays queen d3, for instance, and actually there is at least enough compensation, if not more than enough, for white, because the bishop on a7 is actually quite a bad piece, even though probably with a very precise play black can equalize. But again, all in all, knight h5 is a bit dubious, because also bishop e3 probably gives white a small plus. So that's why rook e8 usually is played here, and you will see the differences. We could have the same position with a pawn on a4 and bishop on c4, and it's also one of the main systems for black. But then white starts to push b4, and he's getting some play on the queen side. Here, white doesn't have this option, so usually knight f1 is played, bishop e6. And now I myself played both moves here, bishop c2, I think against Vishy Anand I played and won in Moscow 2016 or 17, I believe 2016. But I also played bishop e3 against Wesley So in Stavanger, I think 2017, and also then in Blitz against Sergei Karyakin 2019. Bishop e3, of course, it cannot give much to white, but still takes. I think the best move now for black is queen d7, the most precise. This is what Wesley So played against me. And, well, usually I just take on e6, rook takes e6. This position is very close to equal, of course, very little for white, but still he has a little bit more flexible structure. And yeah, if you're, I mean, it's possible to play it with white. And if just one advice, if you're black, don't think that all dangers are already out and the position is totally equal. No, you still have to be a bit accurate here. You know, you still have to play a couple of accurate moves, but in general, it's not the end of the day. Yeah, black will be able to equalize normally. But more ambitious move is bishop c2, and now, yeah, white is ready to get d4, so black should play d5 here, e d5, and this is quite a big theory here. Well, actually, all taken with a queen, bishop, and knight, all three moves are perfectly playable. A very complicated position. I mean, yeah, again, it's not so trivial for black to equalize. I mean, white has some options, so very interesting actually position, which is a bit out of fashion for no particular reason, because it's still not totally clear what is the best way for black, you know, with which piece to take on d5. All in all, I believe that I've analyzed it, and I believe that again, with the best play, black is able to equalize, but it's a complicated and interesting game. So this, in my opinion, this bishop b3 old line, so to say, it's forgotten, almost forgotten, but maybe without big reason, because it's still possible to play bishop b3. But again, most of the time, white is playing a4. So, and before moving to this a4 plan. Yeah, just want to tell you about move orders. First of all, white can start with h3. It is possible. Also, it can be possible if black castles before d6, and then in order to avoid c3, d5, white can start with h3, d6, c3. That is possible. It just maybe it slightly limits white's options. But all in all, most of the time it would lead to the same actually position, yeah, after 2-3 moves, because white would go rook e1 anyway, and most of the time it would be transpositions. But yeah, I think rook e1 leaves white with a little bit more choices. Then another way of playing is a4. To start with a4, well, it depends what is black system against a4. If you want to play with a6, you can play a6 here, and anyway white will get his h3, rook e1 or bishop g5, so it will be transposing. But actually a5 now, I think that's why white doesn't, yeah, starts usually now with rook e1 or h3 or even knight bd2. White do not hurry normally to play a4, because after a5, well, actually you will see that anyways the systems when black is playing a5 with instead of a6 and white pawn is on a2, and then, well, white doesn't have to play a4. Yeah, so a4, a5 is a serious move. That's why most of players they try to start with rook e1 or h3. But anyway, yeah, this is also playable for white. I will show you later. It's also a playable position. So let's say rook e1. Let's start with this move. So now, of course, knight g4 is not working so well yet. So black has to secure his bishop. And well, again, most of the time, you know, in the past, black would play a6, bishop a7, because you actually need to solve this problem with a bishop on c5. d4 is not a threat for now, but it's anyway hanging in the air, and some b4 a4 idea. So actually, you will have to deal, I mean, to secure your bishop on c5, and then better probably to do it immediately. Yeah. But nowadays there are other ways of doing it. For instance, bishop b6 actually is a very serious move. I think Grishuk, he likes to play like this. And it's also not easy for white to get anything. So the idea is that in case of h3, again, if knight bd2, nothing really changed and black can still have the same idea, king h8 and f5. Which probably still is working pretty well for black. So that's why on bishop b6, you should rather maybe start with h3. And then black is playing knight e7. So he wants to get knight to g6, c6, bishop c7. Makes a lot of sense. We can consider it via a4. It might be useful to play a4. Actually, stopping knight e7 because of a5. Usually black is playing a5 and now h3. I think most of the time in this particular variation, a4, a5, including a4, a5 is in white, slightly in white's favor. So that would be my recommendation on bishop b6 to play a4, h3. And here, yeah, actually, according to, I think nowadays theory, black is doing quite okay here, playing h6. The idea is if knight e7, then white gets d4, knight g6, bishop d3. Rook e8, a very typical position. I mean, yeah, there are so many transpositions from different, move orders to more or less the same position. So this is one of it. Knight d2, c6. By the way, you'll be surprised, but this exact position can arise also from Berlin with d3. We are slightly different move order. And here, yeah, there is a lot of theory. But this is not so safe for black. I think main line goes like knight f1, d5, usually bishop g5, and very tactical position where probably black equalizes if he is very, very precise, but white has some chances for opening advantage. So that's why h6, knight bd2, knight e7. Maybe this is a modern way of playing. So, so here d4. I mean, here you get d4, that's why h6, because here d4 doesn't work so well. Knight d2, knight e7, this is a, so to say, Caruana variation. He started to play like this recently, and actually it's quite interesting, because his idea is suddenly that after d4, now he comes back to c6. And it seems that black is actually equalizing here. That's why white is playing knight f1, and now knight g6. again, the idea is that after d4, probably black already can take on e4 and take on d4 and then play d5, or maybe even knight takes e4 is possible, followed by d5. So, and after knight g3, c6, now black is ready to meet d4 with d5. Yeah, so it's very, very concrete play. Yeah, and bishop b3, it's also one of the very big tabias. This position can happen completely symmetrical position. White is tempi up, rook e1 can happen via different move orders, and now it's very important that black should play d5 here, because in this type of position in general, yeah, very important to understand that it's actually essential who is first managing. White playing d4, black manages d5 first. For example, if rook e8 d4, and in this type of position, if black is not in time to get d5, and here it doesn't work so well, then white gets a very nice plus in this position. So because he follows up with bishop c2, bishop e3, queen d2, and white is actually better. So it's very important for black to be first with d5, and here he's just in time to make it e d5, knight d5, and well, it works tactically, because after knight e5, also very typical tactical idea that you can take on e5, and there is bishop takes f2 check, and after king f2, queen f6, and queen takes e5. Yeah, so white shouldn't take on e5, and then then again there are still a lot of games, a lot of theory here. For instance, one of the main moves for white is d4. e d4, knight d4. So a strange position, completely symmetrical, but since a lot of pieces on the board, a lot of tension on the board, this tempi might be, might worth something, that it might give white certain pressure. If I remember correctly, the main move is, strangely enough, here at bishop e6, and finally, after some complications, black is able to equalize here. But all in all, yeah, bishop b6 is a serious system. Another also new fashionable way of playing is a5. So black doesn't even wait for white to play a4. He's just playing a5. Of course, there are a lot of pluses in this move compared to a6, because it stops white from this very typical before a4 idea, which is after e6 most of the time white's main idea in this variation. The minuses are that actually after a5, white doesn't have to spend the tempi securing his bishop on c4, because knight a5 is not threatening anymore. So it's like giving white half tempi. Yeah? And the second minus, that b5 square is becoming a bit, I wouldn't say weak, but under some circumstances, white can try to make use of this b5 square. But all in all, it's a very fashionable system nowadays, and it seems that quite many strong players are playing a5 nowadays. So there is no clear way for white to get an advantage, but still the theoretical battles are going on. It's also not so simple for black. I myself actually usually played a6, but just because I was fine with a6, but it doesn't mean that it's necessarily better than a5. But if you play a5, you have to be very careful, because there is more risk actually than after a6. So after a5, you need to play in black. You need to know exact move orders. Not to get in the worst position. So what are the ideas for white? Let's say if bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, still the same story, g5, bishop g3. I think that is quite harmless, because actually rook on e1 is not always needed, in those positions. So that shouldn't be dangerous, but still has to be considered. Usually white is not playing bishop g5 anymore once he played rook e1. But otherwise h3 is the main idea. Now h6, the main move. And well, again, white can play bishop e3, but we already know that it doesn't give much. Otherwise, what to do? A4 is possible, and this can, as you see, this can be a transposition via A4 move order. Now, again, there are so many delicate move orders. For instance, bishop b6 already here might be interesting with the idea knight e2, knight e7, and again get into this position which can easily happen. Yeah, let's say in case of, white has this d4 ideas, which you have to be careful about. So that might be a problem of this move order. But then, as you know, knight c6, that is Caruana's plan. So this bishop b6 is transposition to the Caruana system, so-called, I call it like this, which can be actually fine for black also, which we just considered a few minutes ago. But then bishop e6 is another way of playing. So the point is that now after bishop b5, it's what is important that black has knight a7 because of the pawn is on a4. If the pawn would have been on a2, then white would just retreat with the bishop and to a4 and then threatening d4. So here knight a7 seems to be okay for black. Therefore, after bishop e6, well, white usually takes and plays bishop e3, which is, in general, this structure is, it looks like black has play on the f line, and it's true, there is some play, but in general, this structure is a bit more pleasant for white, because those pawns, those double pawns might become a target one day. It's also not so easy for black to play d5, because then his e5 pawn becomes really weak. But I would say that my understanding of the structure is, let's say, queen d7, knight bd2. I think here it is quite acceptable for black because he managed a5. So if white would have a pawn on b4 and the potential of, playing b5, playing on the queen side, this position very often is, not so easy for black and slightly better for white. Here with a pawn on a5, I think it's close to equal. I would still prefer white. It's a very playable, slow playable position. You need to study games to see how strong players are playing it. So it's maybe close to equal, but a bit more comfortable for white, in my opinion. But most often, white just wants to play knight bd2 here because he doesn't need to play a4. But then black has to be very precise. So some very direct play starts. Bishop e6. So same idea, if you exchange on a6, then this pawn on a5 is very important that white doesn't have b4. But bishop b5, you see what I told you, that sometimes white can make use of this square. And now, of course, the move of knight a7 doesn't make much sense because white can just go to a4. So this system became popular when actually queen b8 move was found. Again, very strange move. But computers do not have a problem playing such moves. But actually, this is supposed to be after a5 now the main line, and there are some theoretical discussions here. But all in all, as I understand modern situation of modern theory, it seems that black is doing okay here, even though there are always new games and white is always trying to find some new ideas here. So the idea is that knight f1, queen a7, very strange play, frankly. And white has a different way of playing. For instance, bishop e3, which looks logical. Then black simply takes and plays knight e7. And strangely enough, queen on a7 actually is quite good. It's actually very well placed. It's pretty active, and according to the games, at least modern games, black is equalizing here. So white is nowadays trying different ideas. Even one idea is even to play d4. I saw some games ed4, bishop takes e6. This very strange position, dc, bishop goes back somewhere and giving up on b2 and on f2, and this very strange position with unbalanced material, which computer assesses in black's favor, but in fact it's not so simple. Probably it's still okay for black, but the position you really need to analyze. Or another idea is what white does sometimes, is playing rook e2. And with the idea, of course, after knight e7 to have d4, black is trying to play a4. A very strange play, which I don't recommend you to do it with black without knowing very concrete theory, because you can easily get worse here with this queen a7, a4 ideas. But computers, they approve in general this for black, and knight g3, and then, for instance, black is trying to play queen a5 here. One of the ideas forcing white to give up the bishop. But white has some kind of attacking possibilities. Knight h4, knight f5, bishop takes h6. I saw there were quite some games of strong players, Ding Liren, Karyakin here. So you need to study this. You need really to study this variation. It's looking very strange for black. It's a strange play, but again, yeah, if you don't mind, to play in a kind of strange manner, but approved by engine, I quite often somehow find it difficult to force myself to play such strange concepts, even if computers are happy with it. But anyway, if you don't mind, then actually it's quite a serious system, a5. So those are the modern kind of fashionable ways of playing it. But the old style is a6. Again, and now let's say a4, bishop a7, and this is a tabia. This is h3 again, yeah, because again in this position knight bd2 is not good because of the same story. h3, and this is, yeah, I played a lot this with both colors. I think it's in general fine for black, but yeah, white also can try. I mean, that is a good thing about this c3 d3 Italian, that you can play it with both colors. Actually, the position is around equal, a little bit better for white or equal, but it's complicated, it's complex, all the pieces are on the board, and rich of positional ideas. So this type of game I like, so I never minded to play it with black or white. So I will tell you, I mean, what is in my opinion, there's a general overview of this position. So what are the systems? Bishop e6 here is a bit dubious, I believe, because you take bishop e3, and yeah, as you see, it's much better for black to have the pawn on a5 in such positions, because again, if black is playing in the same fashion, then white would just get his b4, b5, and this usually leads to some advantage for white, at least easier play. So bishop e6 is not very common here. At least it's better than already to play it after h6, so white white doesn't have immediately bishop e3. Anyways, there is a system b5, a very strange system. Well, the idea is that obviously that AB bishop b5, black takes on f2, yeah, and then he's then taken on a1, and if bishop c6 taken on b1, so this doesn't work for white, of course. But b5, well, normally white is playing bishop b3. Also, bishop a2 has its own ideas, I mean, also possible. Normally white plays bishop b3 and black plays b4. Also strange play, but again, yeah, I'm not very big fan of this type of play, but not easy for white to get an advantage here. There were some games also of strong players. You can check this system. Again, my feeling is that it will not be enough for full equality for black. So then another, well, quite a serious system is knight e7. That was the main line for many years. I played myself with white, actually. With good results. I remember I beat Rajabov in 2016, Baku Olympia. Then I beat even Magnus Carlsen in classical chess, and Stavanger 2017. I think it's actually a very fine. I mean, the system is probably objectively enough to equalize. There were also games Carlsen Karyakin in the World Championship match in 2016 on this line. But it's not easy, because white has quite a number of tries and black has to remember very, very precisely. It's always a different move order. So not a very practical system, I would say. But again, I don't think it objectively white has an advantage here. So the white has two different concepts. One is trying to play d4 immediately, or another is playing this typical story, knight to f1, knight to g3. Then again, if you remember, in this position d5 is possible, or h6 first, or rook e8 first, then d5. There are lots of nuances. White has some bishop g5 ideas, etc. But all in all, it seems that black is doing okay here according to theory. So the main move is d4. Now knight g6. Yeah, it's important that after ed-cd, black is not in time to take on e4 to make this tactical operation, because rook e4, and after d5 there is rook takes e7. Yeah, that is very important. That's why white is in time to start with d4. And I think that after, if you play d5 here, then e5, I think is very unpleasant. I'm not sure if after ed5 also black is fully equalizing, but there is e5, and here again black has to compromise his pawn structure, and it's quite dangerous position. So usually anyway knight g6 is played, and now there are different ways. White sometimes plays bishop d3, rook e8, but most often knight bd2 is played. Now again this ed-cd operation, I think in this particular situation doesn't fully equalize. For instance, knight e4, d5, and now on top of bishop d3, which is can be quite dangerous. I mean, still not completely sure if black fully equalized, but I think the main problem is bishop g5 here, which leads to quite dangerous position for black, because after f6, now white can retreat with a bishop. I don't know, maybe take first on f6 and then retreat, and because of the pin, it's equal material, but the black skin is a bit unsafe, so probably it's in white's advantage. So that's why, after knight bd2, now c6 is usually the main move, and here white has a number of options. I think Magnus in his match played bishop f1, and then after rook e8 was trying just to get slightly better in those symmetrical positions after de, queen c2, and actually with success. It was the second game, I think, of the tiebreak, and he didn't win it finally, but he was very close. So at the end of the day, there is a move bishop b3, which has its own point actually. I think usually black is here with a bishop on b3 already trying to play like this. e5, knight h5, also note a very typical idea for this variation. And then trying to get knight f4 and f6. Actually the series still goes on and on here. I think with the extremely precise play, black is just in time to equalize, but you really need to know, because strategically it's quite dangerous. And another idea is bishop d3, to play bishop d3, and maybe knight h5 now is a move. Has to be checked, because I think against me Magnus played rook e8, and now bishop c2, I think, was at that time a novelty, and actually quite unpleasant novelty, because I think after bishop c2 there is no way for black to equalize already fully, because somehow bishop c2 is stopping d5. If I remember well, d5 is in white's favor, and after h6, what Magnus already played, first of all, white can still play a useful move like a5, but I've gone knight f1, I think, and here, somehow d5 is never really working well for black, and that is, the most important point of this position. So if white manages to get knight g3, bishop e3, he will be better, and that is what happened in our game. So knight e7 system, very logical, very solid, but you really need to remember it, all those move orders to be very precise with black to equalize. Then much more solid is to play h6. Usually white is playing knight bd2, and now already knight e7 is not so good, because very important for you to understand that if you play knight e7, knight g6, you don't play h6 already. I mean, in this particular position, then you play it with a pawn on h7. If you already play h6, then you follow up with bishop e6 probably immediately, or first rook e8. Bishop e6, I played myself this quite a lot, mainly in rapid or blitz. Well, the point is that you see, since white already have played knight d2, that he doesn't have bishop e3 move. And if knight f1, which is logical, knight h5, and now after bishop e3, and that was played against me in blitz by Anand and by Giri, then you take on e3, and in case of, let's say, knight e3 or rook e3, then white somehow lost some tempis, because his knight is actually good on d2. But here, actually, it is playable system, rather simple to play. That's why I choose it quite often in Blitz games, because you don't need to care so much about move orders, and you just play, according to a clear plan. But I think that at some point computers found a good way for white to play, which is b4, and then followed by black can play queen e8 or queen f6, and then rook a2, a very, very important maneuver. So the idea is that first of all, white starts to threaten b5, because there is no AB bishop f2 after b5. And secondly, rook is very good on the second run, protecting this f2 pawn, which is a bit vulnerable in this position. All in all, even if it's definitely playable for black, but I couldn't finally find a way to equalize fully with black here, so I believe white should be slightly better. That's why rook e8 is most maybe fashionable system against a4. And it's very, very solid. It's very fine. I mean, for black in general, very logical play. You just want to play bishop e6 and d5. But still, white has a small pressure here. I think b4 is the best move. Now bishop e6, because the idea is that I guess if knight e7, followed by knight g6. First of all, as I told you, I'm not sure with h6 it fully equalizes, but also white has this very unpleasant idea, queen b3, which forces black to move the rook back, so I'm not sure knight e7 is so good already. Then bishop e6, there is nothing else logical. Takes, and this is a subject of lots of theoretical discussions, games. I've played myself this more than once. Queen c2 is supposed to be the main move, even though lately bishop b2 becomes quite fashionable. It has its own venom. I played with Rajabov, I think, once this position with black. So white wants more to try to get d4. Actually, here, I think, at least according, you need really to study this variation. It's extremely solid with black. I mean, you'll not get two bad position, this I can guarantee you. But if you want to equalize fully, then you need to be very accurate. But there are enough of games of strong players, and engines are quite good nowadays. So if you do a good work, I think probably you will manage to equalize with this system, even though, again, in general, in a practical sense, white will still keep on trying a bit. Okay, he has a bit more active position, certain pressure on the queen side. So don't expect to make a forced draw in 5 moves here if you are black. White will have at least a nominal plus for quite some time, but it's not too dangerous. So I think after bishop b2, knight h5 for some reason is the most precise way of playing, at least according to theory, which makes sense because now bishop is away from this diagonal from c1 where it controls the f4 square. So black tries to make use of it, organizing some counterattack on the king side. Knight f1 and now knight e7 and so on and so on. So there is a theory, I think black is close to equalize here. And the old main line, I'm of course joking, half joking, because this whole system with a4 is just maybe a few years old. But first, normally white was starting with queen c2, so bishop b2 is a matter of last 2-3 years, which when it becomes fashionable. At the beginning, queen c2 was always played here. So the idea is that if black plays d5, which is very logical, but then knight b3, actually knight is very good on b3 here, and this is somewhat better for white, because he has all those ideas sometimes of b5, attacking the pawn on e5. It's not easy to equalize here. I don't think it's possible at all to equalize fully. And for instance, there was a game Nepomniachtchi Mamedяров, I think, in Moscow 2016 or 17. Nepomniachtchi won it with white. So it considers to be now queen d7 supposed to be more accurate. So actually to wait a bit, to make useful moves and to wait for white to maneuver his knight away from d2 to f1 and then only to play d5. Because if white anyway plays knight b3 here, then black doesn't have to hurry with d5. For instance, he can play knight e7. Even some useful waiting move like rook e8, just improving position of your rook, is also okay. Or knight e7, a typical maneuver, d4, knight g6. In this particular position, knight on b3, is not very well placed. it's better to have the knight on g3. That's why, okay, again, white have tried many different moves here, even moves like rook b1, but then also not necessary, but actually perfectly possible for black is to put pawn on b5 when the rook is out from the A line, and to stop white from, advancing his pawns. But normally knight f1 is the main move, and d5. d5, well, sooner or later should be played here. And this is a quite important theoretical position. Bishop e3 is supposed to be the main move. I think Magnus Carlsen have played knight g3 against me in Vaikanzea 2018. I played rook d8. You can check this game. Actually, I almost managed to win it. But yeah, all in all, just Magnus started to make some strange mistakes in an equal endgame. But all in all, I think I equalized pretty convincingly here. So bishop e3 is the main move, and that is a very important theoretical position in this variation. So black has a choice of playing slowly, takes knight e7, something like this, and white is sometimes playing a5, so rook d1 there. With a little bit of pressure, because usually white's idea is, let's say if black is playing knight g6, that white wants to play c4 very often in those positions. And in case of d4, knight d5 or knight f5 also, and dc also leaves white with some initiative in the center. So yeah, very close to equal, I guess. Yeah, if you analyze it well, you will manage move per move to equalize, but you can check the games of Wesley So, for instance. I think he won more than one game in this variation with white in this particular position. So it's not so trivial. Very little for white, so nothing really to be worried about if you're black, but again, you need still to be precise, accurate. But there is a d4 move if you want really to equalize, in a very straightforward way. And it seems that this position, which is practically forced, queen takes e7, queen takes d3. Again, of course, with the help of computer, it seems that in every line black is holding queen takes b7, queen d8. And white actually cannot keep his pawn. I mean, he has to give it back. Rook d1, takes, f3, rook b4, knight e3. And that's, by the way, not the end of the series. There was still some games of strong players here. Actually, white is still a bit better in this position. And even, for instance, there was a classical game quite recently, maybe a year or two ago, Giri Aranyan, where actually Aranyan almost lost this endgame. I mean, it was at some point lost, but managed to save it by miracle. So it's still not totally drawish. I mean, but again, I think with accurate play, black can manage definitely to make a draw. So I've tried to explain you the whole theory of this c3 d3 line. I mean, as much as I can for your understanding of the general structure. Again, a big choice, especially black has a big choice of systems. If you're playing black, you need to choose something to your liking. If you're white, you kind of have to be ready for all of those systems, especially if you play castle, one thing what is good if you're playing in this positional way is that even if you're not fully ready, you don't have a risk to be worse. But if you want to still pose some problems for your opponent, for black, then you better prepare and try to get understanding of all those nuances of move orders. All in all, actually, I would say I don't think it's objectively giving white any real advantage, but I always find it's kind of comfortable to play with white, and that is the main advantage of this system, playing white, that it's comfortable, it's safe. You always can keep a bit of pressure. Actually, I won quite a number of games with white against very strong players, getting practically nothing out of the opening. For instance, you can have a look at my game against Michael Adams from Shamkir, I think 2017. I won, but because it's always a little bit more comfortable to play with white, and once you get the feeling of those positions, then you can always keep it going and pose some practical problems for your opponents. Again, from the black side, I always felt kind of comfortable playing black these positions because I know that it cannot be too bad, and black is extremely solid. So yeah, that is the system. But again, if you want to play it on a professional level, I think for a club player or amateur, that is definitely already enough of information. You can already start playing this opening. If you are a professional player, probably you should study a bit more, but that probably means that you have already studied more than that in your life. So yeah, but in any case, I believe that I tried my best to give you in this format to give you maximum information. Hope it was not too complicated, because there's so many move orders, etc., that your head can start to be turning. But what to do? This is the essence of the system. It's very subtle play. So good luck playing Italian with either color. I personally enjoy it. I always like to play Italian. I find it in its own way a very interesting opening. And now, so next we are going to move to Ruy Lopez, and I will try to cover all the major systems. I mean, at least a little bit to cover everything, but quite extensively the major systems in the Ruy Lopez.